Hey, all you console loggers out there. Just wanted to take a quick second to apologize in advance for the, in my opinion, poor audio quality of this episode. We encountered some echoing and humming from a fan here, as this is the first time that we record with two people. We had some production issues. Hopefully, we can get these resolved in the future, but for now, hopefully, it won't be too distracting as you listen to the episode. I do think it is a great episode. I hope you do enjoy the content and can get by with the otherwise distractions that would occur. With that being said, on with the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Consolog. This is episode number 48, the week of August 8th through August 14th. What a wonderful week it has been. I hope you've had a good week. I've had a good week as well. The weather in New York City has been gross. But let's not talk about the weather because that's always the same and we can do better. I have a very lovely, special, and fun guest host with me today. My good friend Matthew Gerstmann is here on the podcast to talk shop about all the latest news from the past week of JavaScript. Matthew, please do say hello to the wide world of console loggers.
Hey, beautiful listeners. My name is Matthew, not Matt. I identify as a Slytherin, and sometimes I write JavaScript.
That is a great introduction, Matthew. I appreciate that, and I'm happy to have you on. We've been working on this for the past 2 weeks, making sure our schedules are aligned. Me with a baby, you with a life. I don't have a life, I just have a baby now. So hopefully having another voice here will provide some more entertainment value to your lovely ears as you meander through your lives of code and work and folly and joy. And with enough of me speaking in warbly talk, let's get on with this show and roll that intro. Okay. One thing I forgot to mention is that stay tuned to the end of the episode. I have a fun little piece of React trivia that I'm going to share with you. It was a fun little tweet I found this past week that is not really it's not gonna affect you day to day, but it's gonna definitely make your life of React trivia more entertaining. Do not ask that on the interview because that will not be something that
It's really top notch. One time, fun fact, I came in second place in a React trivia contest, and had I known this, I would have won some AirPods. But instead, I won an Amazon gift card, and I'm still a little upset about it.
Was this actually a question?
No, it was different React trivia. But you know what? This could have come up.
That's true. It definitely could have. All right, so enough of us teasing the end. Let's get to the beginning. First thing I want to talk about is there was a recent issue opened on the very popular Refined GitHub project on GitHub. If you don't know what Refined GitHub is, it is a Chrome extension that augments GitHub to be a little bit more pleasant for users, both as an open source maintainer, but also just as a general user. And it's been maintained by the community and added a lot of nice features. And this issue that was opened up was actually opened up by a product manager at GitHub. Yes, the thing that Refined GitHub is talking about. And this product manager was introducing himself to the project and to the wider community and saying that there is now actually a team that is being built out within GitHub to address many of these same UX pain points that the Refined GitHub Chrome extension was trying to fix. And they did a little thing. He said that they're calling the team paper cuts. And I've actually never heard this term before. I know what a paper cut is, but I never heard of this thing, a paper cut bug. Which, if you look on there's a whole Wikipedia page. I always love these little programming idioms like yak shaving, bike shedding, bugs. I don't know if that's really an idiom. That's just more just a thing.
There was a literal bug. That's where that comes from.
Oh, that's true.
There was a moth in a vacuum tube.
And then the follow-up trivia question is what year? Which I have no idea about.
I think it was like 50s or 60s.
Yeah, before I was born. You were around though.
Yeah, I'm that old.
You're an old soul.
Totally.
That's all that counts. So, a paper cut bug is defined as a trivially, that's like Tivoli in Copenhagen, a trivially fixable usability bug. And it was coined from the Ubuntu Linux-based operating systems where they were trying to make the first day usage of a new user as pleasant as possible. The analogy is that just like a paper cut, which is small but not seriously damaging, but it is surprisingly painful, these bugs are of the same venue. So this is GitHub officially trying to address these paper cut bugs that people experience day to day, these very small UX issues. And one of them we talked about last week was about how now when you copy and paste diffs, the pluses and minuses are no longer being copied and pasted, which I don't know, have you taken advantage of that recently, Matt? Do you?
Yeah, that has affected me in the past. That's one of those miserable things. I think this is a super cool thing for a couple reasons. First of all, many companies we just have backlogs of bugs that we just kind of like shuffle around and someone gets to eventually. So it's really cool to hear that GitHub is taking the initiative and actually addressing these for their users. This also kind of reminds me of what Reddit did in the last year, where on the previous version of Reddit, the Reddit enhancement suite was almost mandatory. And then over the last year, they've started to implement those features into the new Reddit experience. And I think that's a little bit, I'm guessing that's what GitHub is going for as well, in that if you need an extension to make GitHub usable, they are failing. So they want to fix that.
I guess they're putting that Microsoft money to good use.
Yeah, I guess so.
I imagine this was already in the works, but these types of teams don't come out of nowhere. This takes dedicated resources, time, value, money. So having that be pushed to the top of priority and having actually a team be formed for that is just a great level of maturity on GitHub's part. So kudos, GitHub. Excited to see more things coming down the pike, as it were to say. The next thing to talk about is the lovely alternative to React named Preact, which stands for Pretty Awesome Acting. Is that true?
Is that really what it stands for?
Nope, just making things up as I go. That's what half of this podcast is
Let's
about.
go with Pico React. It's tiny.
Oh, I like that.
Pico. I don't actually know what that is, but we can pretend it is.
Yeah, I always thought it was Pretend React or just a thing that was React with a P for, I don't know. You can make many words with P's I'm not going to talk about.
Sure.
So the fun thing about this, Preact has actually, in many ways, Preact seems to be done, quote unquote done. They've achieved what they like. Preact, in case you don't know, is a API compatible library for React with an emphasis on being as small as possible, so that if you want to make a mobile website, Preact would be your go-to framework because the size of the framework would be as minimal as possible. There was a new release of Preact out this past week, 8.3.0, which is why we're talking about it. And the notable things that are included, some of the notable things that are included in this is one, Preact has now added support for the new React lifecycle methods of get derived state from props and get snapshot before update. So that is now bringing Preact more towards parity. I'll be curious to see how Preact has to scale as React itself changes as well with React Suspense and async React. So that'll be a space that might start having a divergence or at least a non-optimized version of React, I guess you could say, the more sync version of React.
Yeah, so the primary difference, for those of you who don't know, between Preact and React is Preact cuts out all of the synthetic events that allows standardization across browsers, but you might not need that on, say, mobile devices if that's what you're working on.
Yeah, most mobile devices are more modern, so you don't even have to worry about legacy.
Right, so it's a much smaller package, and that's the advantage of it. And that's why it is so funny. One of my favorite things from this release is that someone found dead code. They found 6 characters that were unnecessary. It was like 9 characters. Anyway, not child and, which that happened to always evaluate to true. But the funny thing about that is in a library whose sole purpose is to eliminate code that is unnecessary, someone managed to find some unnecessary codes. It's just a little ironic.
And if you follow the developer of Preact on Twitter, Jason Miller, he prides himself on being as terse and, in my opinion, and this is mostly a joke, unreadable code because it is so terse. But that's take 2 things and got to do that. So I'm sure he was very happy to see that.
He's just trying to turn in a good code golf scorecard.
You know what? You got to go when you go up against Tiger Woods. You got to bring your A game.
Exactly, and that's what Preact is doing. So good for them.
Cool. Let's move on to a new thing. I talked about this before. Dart, the not JavaScript replacement framework, which sadly had a very poorly managed marketing rollout of its initial release of Dart. But this reason why we're bringing up today is that Dart 2 is now stable and ready for the web. Dart 2, they're taking a more measured approach, a more targeted approach to how to market Dart to engineers. There's two avenues that they're attacking, both having Dart 2 be used for mobile applications with Flutter, which is a framework built on top of Dart 2, which I've talked about in the past, which allows you to write Dart, which looks mostly like JavaScript with some typing included, allows you to actually write Dart code that will compile down to native code, similar to React Native. And then also, Dart 2 will also target the web with a Angular Dart 5, which is taking inspiration from the Angular framework and having that be put into the Dart one. This blog post was just mostly announcing that Dart 2 is now final. They're really trying to sell it here. They're trying to make a case for it. It's hard for me to see where this fits into the web ecosystem, but I always think variety is good. It encourages competition. They were talking about how Dart is one of so inside of Google, you actually have to have a language be approved for you to use it for a project. And because Dart is built by Google, not surprisingly, it is actually an approved language that you can use at Google, and it's being used with projects such as Google Ads, Google Shopping, and other internal infrastructure teams. I think the most notable usage of Dart outside of Google is actually the Sass style sheet preprocessor that was actually rewritten in Dart. Not surprisingly, the author, the maintainer of Sass works at Google, so that definitely does work together nicely. But this is just to bring to your information that Dart 2 is now stable. If you are curious about seeing some different languages, playing around with things, this is definitely a place that you can go to try out things on the internet.
Yeah, and Google's always going to have these internal languages that they're working on, and that's kind of a given. But it's really nice that they're open sourcing this, especially just because it helps spread ideas. One of the big things we've seen in the last couple of years is that JavaScript is on the road to be typed, whether that is 2, 5, or 10 years away. At some point in time, the language will probably be typed, and I think Dart is just further proof of that. So it's nice to see that someone is experimenting with more ways of typing JavaScript, and it's kind of cool. It looks a little bit like C++, which is crazy. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely taking more of the newer languages inspirations, such as having there be the ability to have types be inferred, so they don't actually have to have the boilerplate of adding types to every variable. I would love to see JavaScript personally, and I know this is definitely a contentious point, but I would love to see JavaScript have typing in the future built in. I would love to see it go the Python, I think 3.5 route, which adds the ability for you to add optional typings. But yeah, when there's been attempts in the TC39 process to have types, but the amount of sheds that have to hold those bikes are so large that I think you might actually have to have a skyscraper to actually get that through, so to speak.
They need the city bike of sheds.
The city bike of sheds. The city bike, yes.
For those of you who are not in New York City, we have a bike sharing program called City Bike, and they are
CITI.
They are not a sponsor, but if they want to give us money, they are welcome to.
Yeah, we could do the podcast while biking. You'll just hear us going. What? That was a natural cough. Oh boy, gotta get out from behind the desk. Okay, let's move on to another fun security issue, which is always fun to hear about. A blog post was posted this past week called "How I Gain Commit Access to Homebrew in 30 Minutes." You'll never guess what this article is about. It's about how someone gained commit. Okay, I'm not going to repeat that. Why I'm bringing this up? Because this isn't exactly a JavaScript topic. It's a web topic. Homebrew is one of the most widely used tools that people install many dependencies daily. You can install Git with it. Most notably, you can install OpenSSL with it. And this security person was able to actually find, he noticed that Homebrew runs a public Jenkins instance, Jenkins being a CI environment. He saw that the Jenkins environment was able to make authenticated pushes to repos. And he was like, how is it being able to push to a repo? Usually you have to have access to that. And he looked through Jenkins UI and saw that there is actually an environmental variables on the left-hand side of the website that contains a list of variables that are being passed into Jenkins when it runs. And one of those was a GitHub API token. And that GitHub API token had Git commit access to Homebrew, meaning that this attacker, if they were malicious, could actually inject and augment the packages that millions of developers around the world were installing, meaning that when you were to do brew install OpenSSL, you could potentially install malicious code and never be the wiser. Luckily, this was a good citizen of the internet, so they reported it. Homebrew has already removed the token. They've also checked to make sure that the token wasn't used maliciously before. But, I mean, there's definitely a higher attack vector going on to these central package managers because of the upside in exploiting them.
Yeah, and we've seen this a good amount lately. We saw this recently with NPM. There was some low-level package that was compromised actually actively in production, right, Harry? Send tokens out. I remember reading about this a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I think I talked about it too. That was somebody was able to get the login for a ESLint maintainer and published a new version of an ESLint dependency, like an internal dependency, that when you installed the new version would copy your .npmrc file to try to steal your auth codes. Luckily, the hacker did not know JavaScript well, so the hack was discovered due to an error in the hacking code. But again, NPM has now actually added a beta version of requiring 2FA on a package basis. So just as how a user can have 2FA, now packages must require 2FA for you to publish them. So as these security holes are found, they're patched, but it's definitely a game of whack-a-mole because where there is upside to be gained from being malicious, people will be malicious to get that upside.
Yeah, and once you put code out there, it runs pretty much forever somewhere. So I have code that I wrote in college that is still running, and people are using it just because I wrote it and they think it works. I guess it does.
Well, they find value, yeah.
So always just be careful about these types of things, and just remember that if you have an exploit today, it's likely to live on forever somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, there's more security companies popping up to audit your code. If you're working at a big company, hopefully you have that in place. If you don't, I need to research more what options are available.
Wasn't there an Internet of Things DDoS last year? That was a big one. A bunch of Internet of Things devices had outdated firmware on them, and someone exploited this firmware and performed a DDoS. Was it on AWS?
I think it was against GitHub.
It was against GitHub, yeah, you're right. Yeah, so anyway, security is always going to be a big, scary thing. Harry, why don't you bring us on to a happier topic?
Oh, what a great segue. Let me talk about a thing that I think everybody has been clamoring for, and I know once it's here, though, I'm sure there'll be complaints, as for any momentous things. Babel, everybody's favorite transpiler for JavaScript. They've been working on Babel 7, I think, for almost a year. I'd have to actually check to see when the first beta release was. But this past week, they finally published RC0, which means that Babel 7 is coming. And the big deal with RC0 is that there will no longer be any breaking changes going forward. There will be fixes for bugs and regressions, but if you currently use Babel 6, now would be a great time to start beta testing Babel 7 and reporting any bugs you find to the Babel team while their heads are in the game of trying to fix these issues.
Yeah, and this is a really cool release. There's kind of two big things. First of all, there's your standard set of upgrades of things that it's going to support. Like we're going to start getting like the pipeline operator and the null-ish coalescer, so those are cool. But what I actually find really interesting about Babel 7 is they're getting rid of yearly presets. So in the past, it used to be Babel preset 2015 or 2016, etc. And then eventually they moved it to preset latest. And now they're just saying, we're going to have you opt into experimental features because JavaScript is so in flux all the time. And if you look at the way they've done this, they've also removed stage presets. So like you can't say I'm cool with using all stage 2 features because those things go up and down as well. So it's very cool that Babel is reflecting how in flux JavaScript is as a language, which is interesting to see.
I think I think it's a breaking change if you use some internal things, but a big change with Babel 7, which I think most people who deal with tooling will love, is that they've introduced a new way to configure how Babel applies transforms to files by the way of I think it's a .babel config. And the short version of why this is awesome is that if you've ever been bit by a bug where there was some node module package that was not transpiled correctly and you had to actually have it be transpiled, the pain of doing that with Webpack, whatever, it was big. It was a big pain. So Babel actually, in Babel 7, will now allow you to selectively decide for which files to apply certain transforms, so that this might pave the way forward to open the door for packages to publish the non-transpiled code, and then in your own application, then decide how you'd want to transpile that code for you. I am confident there'll be more blog posts about this coming up because this is a big deal. It'll hopefully make developing application development going forward and transpiling going forward a lot better. But it's something that I'm been super excited about because there's been so many times in a Webpack config I've had to do, you do exclude no modules by default except for these named packages, which has been no bueno. But yeah, so Babel 7, it's ready. Test it, help out the team. They're doing so much good work, so much good karma for the JavaScript community that it would be such a shame not to give back in any way possible. So let's talk about
Do you hear that music, Harry?
No.
It sounds like a fiddle, like some type of light, happy music. It's oh no, it's Electron Fiddle. That's what it is. It's yeah.
Is that a new song from Led Zeppelin?
No,
I know they're still making music.
Unfortunately, no. I don't think Led Zeppelin are making new music anymore. But anyway, Electron Fiddle, it's very exciting. So many of you are familiar with JS Fiddle, which is an online tool that allows you to just write code and run it in the browser. Well, now Electron, the popular JavaScript on the desktop application, has made Electron Fiddle, and you can test desktop level code just as like quick and prototypey of an environment. Now, it's worth noting that this is super early phase, but it's a pretty cool project that I'm excited to see what happens with it.
Yep, Fiddles is definitely a great way to get up and running. Electron applications can definitely be a little bit onerous to get set up, especially if you've never done it before. There's 4 things that the developer of Electron Fiddle worked on. This fellow by the name of Felix Riesberg. Hopefully I said that correctly. Apologies if not. But the 4 things that they're focused on is making sure that you actually have auto-completion via using Visual Studio Code, ability to share your Electron Fiddles, be able to compile and package it with these, and be able to just get up and going from the beginning. So if you've ever been curious about what it would be like to create an Electron application, this is your fiddle that you should pick up.
Sounds like a great instrument.
Thank you. And last main topic of the week before we get to the fun React trivia. This one I'm actually honestly very excited about. So hopefully you are familiar with the framework called Vue, Vue. It's a very popular framework that rivals React in popularity in some circles. And the big deal with Vue this past week is that the Vue CLI 3.0 was released as final. And this has been a complete rewrite from the ground up. And the features that's included here by default, and again, let me also back up and say that the Vue CLI is a officially core approved piece of technology. Like the Vue team, which is mostly one person, maintains and supports this directly. But this Vue CLI has...
Do you know who that maintainer is?
It's Evan You.
Evan You? Okay.
Evan You, yeah. He used to work at Google on the Angular team. He got inspired by Angular and started noodling with Vue. Vue feels more like Angular 1 than Angular 2, but it fixes a lot of the pain points that Angular 1 had. And he's just taken it so many steps further. But the things that I love about Vue CLI is that, I mean, the easy description is that Vue CLI provides a pre-configured build setup built on top of Webpack 4. Out of the box, it comes with all the things that you'd expect from a modern development environment with hot module reloading, code splitting, ES 2017 transpilation, support for post-CSS, so many things. Just, I mean, anything that you could want is just included here by default. There's also ability to add optional integrations. So if you want to use TypeScript, you can do that as an optional add-on. And you can also extend and configure Vue CLI without having to eject. One of my biggest pain points with Create React App, I don't really remember I think they're trying to make Create React App as kid-friendly as possible, so there's no way to configure it without ejecting, but I think there is definitely a middle ground here, which I think Vue CLI tackled pretty well while having you have great defaults, but also be able to configure it as well. I think the biggest awesomest thing about this release, which I would love to see just officially supported, is this graphical user interface. I would definitely encourage you to check out the show notes, click on the link to the blog post announcing the release of this release, and see the picture of the UI that's included in the Vue CLI by default, which makes the entire experience of making a Vue application feel just more like an application, less like a hobbled together piece of different code.
It's always cool to see what Vue does. Even though they're not quite as well adopted as React, they are very popular. And the nice thing is they're entirely open source. So React is very much driven by Facebook, which is a corporation, and Facebook has their own needs and goals. And while React is good about being open about a lot of things, like some things we don't get to see, like suspense, for example. So it's very cool that Vue has been as successful as it is, just because it's built entirely by volunteers.
And also, I think because Vue takes a more hands-on approach to what it supports, it's able to do more. And like one of the things that's included by default here is this thing called Modern Mode, where if you opt into this mode when building your Vue application, the Vue CLI will actually produce two versions of your app. One, which will include the legacy bundles that everybody already uses that target older browsers that transpile everything. And then another one that will actually only target browsers that support ES modules by default, meaning that there will be less to transpile, meaning that the code itself will be smaller in size because there's less boilerplate to add to it. And there's a blog post that was written a long time ago detailing how you can actually create this hybrid application of both a modern and legacy being built at the same time. And Vue is building that in by default for you for free. So that is a thing that if Create React App would add to that, that'd be amazing. And I would honestly just love to see just more hand-holding from React in some ways, because React is definitely a hands-off approach, but sometimes you just want a hug. And that this Vue CLI is that hug, which I would love to have on the React side of things.
Yeah, one of my favorite tweets that I saw from Dan Abramov of React fame is, would you appreciate if React docs were more opinionated, and what would that look like? Because they are just very, very unopinionated, which is both a blessing and a curse.
And then you would know something of that coming from the House Slytherin.
It's true. I am a Slytherin, and I'm very proud of it. I'm ambitious.
So let's just cut to the chase and talk about this fun little React trivia. Hopefully we didn't amp it up too much, but
it's really a letdown now that we're at the end of the episode. Well, this is not exciting.
I mean, it's one that definitely is fun to know about. So everybody knows in React, when you want to actually create a component, you always have to have at least a render method created on that component. Render method is what is used by React to actually know how to render the UI. But did you know, Matthew? Did you know before, what is 6? What month is 6? July? Is that July?
That's June.
That's June. Really?
June.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Before June 4th, 2012, the year in which I was born. Again, not true. Just random trivia that I'm making up. But
this would be very impressive for a 6-year-old.
I mean, I'm advanced beyond my years, and just I stand on the shoulders of giants. But June 4th, 2012, the method of render was actually named structure. That is the piece of trivia. I bet you're gobsmacked.
Yeah, so you can thank Sophie Alpert for tweeting that in response to a thought by Jared Palmer. And yeah, that was your super exciting trivia that we held off until the end of the episode.
But imagine every React component that you make, you have to write structure instead of render. How awkward.
Yeah, that would be obnoxious.
I would just throw React to the ground and be like, hell no, I will not structure.
It would be almost as obnoxious as having to write out the function getDerivedState from props.
Whoa, throwing shade. Throwing shade and you're not even a lamp.
It's as though they named it when they don't want you to use it.
Oh, such as the other one, which is like, do not use internal only, you will be fired if I see you using this.
Well, I remember when they first announced getDerivedState from props, they said it's intentionally clunky so you don't use it too much. Like, that was a thing that was said.
Well, I think it's doing its job well.
Yeah.
Okay, and that was your Consulog episode number 48, August 8th through August 14th. Matthew, thank you so much for being on the episode. It was much more fun to talk with somebody else aside from just myself and the laptop. Hopefully you out there as well enjoyed hearing us talk at length. We'd love to hear your feedback, comments, opinions, suggestions, and most recent paper cut bug that you encountered that we'd love to hear about as well.
Yeah, thank you, Harry, for having me. Thank you, listeners, for listening to me. And if there are any Hogwarts professors out there, I am now fishing for points for Slytherin.
Man, that one last dive at the end to get some freebies. And with that, we'll say goodbye and see you again next week.